because you had Americans killing Americans. If you were injured in the war, you were probably going to lose your life because of poor medical facilities. So this great national conflict wasn't caused by freedom for my people and I. But a historian named William Dunning, teaching in the 1890s, re-looked at the causation of the war. And it's those Dunning School historians that attribute it to freedom for African Americans. If you look at the actual causation of the American Civil War, it was caused because of the economic imbalance between an industrialized North and an agricultural South. And ever since the beginning of the country, there had been a struggle to maintain a balance between the North and the South politically and economically. By the 1850s, it was apparent that there was no way an agricultural South was going to be equal to an industrialized North. There was going to be an economic disparity there. President Abraham Lincoln admired the Union. Lincoln was very honest in his evaluation that this nation of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. That was his reason for fighting the Civil War. Freedom for African Americans was secondary to Lincoln and was only accomplished because of his political need. So Lincoln found it politically expedient to issue a proclamation which freed no slaves. Not one slave was freed by Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. You're in Nashville, Tennessee right now. In Nashville, Tennessee on December 15th, we celebrate the Battle of Nashville. The Battle of Nashville was won by the Union Army, and it was fought by African Americans. And the 369th, a black regiment, would come to Tennessee and began the decline of the Southern armies, because the Battle of Nashville was won by African American fighting forces. Finally, with the enactment of the Freedmen's Act, of the Freedmen's Bureau Act in 1865, the Union government, the Northern government, would provide funds for education. The money was set aside by the government with the sale of abandoned land and abandoned animals in the South. That money was used for two purposes: for education and for medical care. And how can you exist in a society when you can't read? When you can't read, and you don't know what a danger sign means. My ancestors greatly wanted to be able to read the Bible because they had been taught that in order to go to heaven, you had to read the Bible. And if you had lived through slavery, you had been through hell. So you sure wanted to charter your way to heaven. So these schools were set up. Initially, this school was chartered, named for General Fisk. It was Fisk Free School for the Coloreds. That was a chartered name. It was a free school for those persons designated as a color. We opened our doors January the 9th, 1866, at the site of a Union train station. When the Union Army occupied Nashville, they had to build train facilities. One reason that the South had lost the war was its inability to move men and machinery. They didn't have a railway system. You can't fight a war if you can't move men and machineries. The first thing the Army of the North did when it held Nashville was it began to build railroad facilities. And among those, they built a train station. So consequently here, like in Louisville and many cities, we have a Union train station. It didn't mean it was built by people in labor unions. It was built by the Union Army. When plantations were freed by the Army, the young black men were impressed into the Union Army. So the young men were placed into the Army. The older men, the women, the children, were placed in contraband camps. I won't tell you they were as bad as prisoners of war camps, but they were pretty gloomy places. So there was no running freedom. One of those contraband camps had been located near the train station. So these people now were allowed to come to school. They were allowed to attend the free colored school. But the school was formed for my people downtown. General Fisk would allow the barracks to be used. He was the general in charge of Nashville. He allowed the barracks to be used, and the school would take his name. My people came. They wanted to learn to read and write, to cipher, do mathematics. They wanted to be educated. The great irony, today people sometimes wonder why black children have to be brought and forced to come to school, but my people readily came to be educated, to have their minds open. By May of that first year, there were more than 500. By 1 year, there were 1,300 persons estimated to be studying at the free colored school. The government gives, the government can take away. The Freedmen's Act wasn't refunded after 1870. By the 1880s, remember, at the end of the Civil War, you have the beginnings of something called social Darwinism. It wasn't enough that I had been enslaved for 300 years. Now, scholars begin to question my intellectual equality. They take the biological theories of Charles Darwin, where they classify species, and they apply it to humans. And the classification was something like Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, Caucasian, Asian, and African. And we were at the bottom of the pyramid. This wasn't coming out of the racist South. This was coming out of Harvard, Yale, Columbia. Social Darwinism.